A former Reagan senior official praised my novel, A Time for War. She sent me an email. She said, I just finished reading Michael Savage's great novel, A Time for War, especially interesting regarding the threat of an EMP attack. She said, I served in the Reagan White House, senior director of the National Security Council. God, I wish she was still there. I'm very concerned, she writes, about EMP effects. I've done a ton of research about it, have written about it, and thought it would be fun to call into a show sometime to talk about it. I know it's hard to predict the news and what he would want to talk about on certain dates, but if I can swing in time to call and that would be convenient for him, let me know. Thanks, Karna Bodman. Ladies and gentlemen, my novel, A Time for War, is the perfect Father's Day gift. It's available in bookstores now. There's not one listener of this show who shouldn't read A Time for War. Welcome back to the Savage Nation. Now let's talk with the former senior director of the National Security Council and the highest-ranking woman on the White House staff under Reagan. Okay? Wish to God she was still there. She sent me an email saying that my novel, A Time for War, is prescient, important, and she's here to talk about it. And we've talked before about the possible threats to the country from cells within using unconventional methods like an EMP attack. I brought this up in my latest novel, A Time for War. Joining us now is Karna Bodman, a former senior director of the National Security Council and highest-ranking woman on the White House staff under Ronald Reagan, who's been studying the effects of a possible EMP attacks. As I brought it up in my novel, well, here we go again. Karna Bodman, welcome to the Savage Nation.
Hey, delighted to be with you, Michael. This is going to be great fun.
Well, give the audience a little background on yourself.
Well, I did, well, first of all, for about 15 years I was on the air. I used to anchor the news out in the West Coast, San Francisco, which is one of the locations in your terrific book, A Time for War, and also in Washington, D.C., and then I did go into the Reagan White House, served there for 6 years. So I had the honor of serving with the man. It was really terrific.
What about my novel, A Time for War, caught your eye? What caused you to write me?
Well, I tell you, I saw a review. I believe it was in Publishers Weekly, and I read a lot of these reviews. I try to keep up with the thriller genre and so forth. And the book, it talked about an EMP threat, and I thought, oh my word, this is an issue. I've been writing about it myself. I wrote a political thriller about it. Castle Bravo came out recently. I thought I have to read Michael's book. It just sounds fascinating. So I picked up the book, finished reading it, and had a great time because, as I said, it takes place in San Francisco. It takes place at Travis Air Force Base, which actually I once lived there for a year and a half years ago when I was once married to an Air Force officer. But the bigger point is that EMP, electromagnetic pulse, is a true threat. I mean, I know we write about it in political thrillers, but this is something that I've been following for a long time, especially tying it into our missile defense system, which, of course, I was there when Reagan announced his missile defense MD program, SDI, or Star Wars, as some people would call it. So this is a key component that we should be expanding to guard ourselves against an EMP attack.
What kind of effects would we see from an EMP-style attack?
Well, Michael, let me share with you a story that, actually a conversation that I had with the Major General who was head of our entire Missile Defense Force. And we were talking about EMP and what it means, what it is, and so forth. And he said, let's imagine that it's a few years down the road and some militant group, country doesn't like us, somehow gets hold of a small nuclear device. Now, they're all trying, right? I mean, Pakistan has got 100 of them. I mean, they're all over the place. And let's say they also get hold of a delivery vehicle. Could be as simple as a Scud missile. Now, by the way, somebody tried to sell a Scud missile on eBay some time ago. Caught that guy. So let's say they have these components, and they're on a disguised fishing boat or something off one of our coasts. And what their plan is, they're not going to aim it directly at Los Angeles or San Francisco or New York, which would be unbelievable, of course. No. The plan would be to aim it straight up in the air and detonate it many miles up in the atmosphere. Could be 50 miles up. Now, what happens in that eventuality is it doesn't kill you on the ground. No, not right then. It doesn't. But what it does is think of shock waves emanating from this nuclear detonation. And those shock waves are called, as we read about, an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP. And what that does, it flies all the electronics on the ground, not just targeted ones in small weapons, but all of them from that kind of a distance. So we would have no electricity grid, no internet, no cell phones, no aviation, no transportation, no communication of any kind. We would have no automobiles that would work, no refrigeration. And he looked at me and he said, Karna, it would set us back to the year 1910. And don't think our enemies aren't looking at it.
Well, is this a kind of attack we can recover from in a week or two?
No way. Here's the problem. It isn't as if the grid comes back or the lights come back on a week later after you fix the lines after a hurricane or a tornado or something. No. They're fried. So you have to replace them. And here's the problem. We don't think how long it would take to replace all those parts, all those computers, all those turbines, all those lines. No, this is a very real threat. Now, this is one reason why I'm so concerned about expanding our missile defense forces. Especially, we do have interceptors, as you all know, out at Vandenberg Air Force Base by Santa Barbara. And they're tied in with radar and satellites up at Fort Greely, Alaska, and we're working with other countries. But we don't have any interceptors on the East Coast. Oh, now I will say this. Okay. The Obama administration, after cutting back on missile defense plans and even canceling the second test of the airborne laser, which we had been working on, which is pretty cool, he now is kind of okay under a lot of pressure. He's going to start up some of these systems again and work on maybe putting some interceptors on the East Coast to protect us. But you know what? It's supposed to be after an environmental study. Can you believe this? I mean, what the heck would the environmental impact of a nuclear strike be? Tell me that.
Do you think this government is doing enough to protect us from such an attack?
No, our government is not doing enough. Here's the thing, Michael. We've had what we call an EMP commission. You know, really smart guys looking at this issue, and they testify before Congress. And in fact, I read all the testimony several years ago. They made all kinds of very good recommendations about hardening systems, hardening the grid, ordering backup turbines, and things like that, which we don't even make anymore. I think they're made in Japan. It'd take a year or two. Getting better equipment, and all that sort of thing. But, you know, it takes money and a determination, and so things really have just been put off and not done. Oh, yeah, now certain things are hardened. Yeah, our military communications, a lot of their systems are hardened, Air Force One probably. But, hey, what about the rest of us? What about the rest of us?
Well, what should they be doing? What changes should be made for our national security?
Well, number one is, as we just said, missile defense. We do have some terrific people working on missile defense systems. And, you know, I wish President Reagan were alive today, God love him, to see that his dream of missile defense is really working. I mean, we've had over 40 successful tests of ballistic missile targets. And tests, as I mentioned once, you know, we have an airborne laser system. We also have the Aegis system, which is on ships. And we're expanding a little bit the Aegis, but then again, something else that I read, which just is unbelievable, some of the things that we want to do. Russia keeps getting upset about this. In fact, they've even asked us to limit the interceptor speeds that our equipment would work at, you see. So, you know, yeah, slow it down. It may hit it, it may not, you know. So number one would be missile defense, truly. And it's not that big of a budget item. It really isn't. If you run the numbers of the whole Pentagon budget, it's something like 0.09% or something. It's really minuscule. So that's number one. Backup equipment is number two, and hardening as many systems as we possibly can is number three. And paying attention and reconstituting a really good EMP commission to keep studying these issues.
Do you think this administration will do what's needed? I don't.
No. The administration, I don't see this administration as being that dedicated. I really don't. Whereas, my goodness, the first job of a president is protect the country. He talks a good game, but we can just see exactly what's going on out there. And I don't feel any more secure. I don't know if anybody else in your audience does, but I certainly don't. And this is why I know you write about it. You've written about these things. I write about it. I don't even want to speculate what could happen. Now, you know there was a show on NBC. I think it was, there is a show called Revolution. They should send us royalties or something because it's right out of our stories. And that is, how would we be living after all electronics are fried? And that's kind of the question, how would we? I mean, we are so dependent on electronics. Nothing would work except perhaps if somebody had an old 1950s Chevy or something that has no electronics, but the only ones we have left around the hemisphere are probably down in Cuba. But it's a very real threat. And one reason that I'm sure you write about it, I write about it, and others do as well, and that is to call attention to these issues. Well, giving the reader a good story, a good thriller to read. I'm reminded that George Bernard Shaw once had a pretty good quote. He said, "The best way to get your point across is to entertain," and that's what I know. That's what you're trying to do.
Look, in my novel, A Time for War, I answer this, but I want your opinion. Do you have a sense of what the chance is we see this kind of attack, and who would it come from? I think it's going to come from the Chinese. Who else has the capacity for it? And that's why in my novel, A Time for War, they are the villain.
Well, we do know that other countries are developing these kinds of what we call e-weapons. Now, I'm not saying that they would necessarily strap a small nuclear device on a missile, as was described earlier, although I think there are some militant groups that would dearly love to try to do something like that. Whether they'd have the capability in the near future, one doesn't know. But these other types of e-weapons in A Time for War, it could be very real. As a matter of fact, we know, for instance, that the Chinese have been trying to steal a lot of our defense, secrets. That's been all over the news, all over the time. But we have developed, our defense contractors have developed smaller e-weapons, not nuclear, but using certain kinds of microwaves and so forth, same effect, where you can, in a recent test was they zapped a building that was filled with all kinds of old computers, and they even had TV cameras set up to record the test. They zapped the building with this kind of an e-weapon, and they went in later, and all of the electronics were fried in the building. Could never use any of them again. And this is exactly, in fact, it's called CHAMP. They always have acronyms for these things. And we did use an e-weapon, I believe, in the beginning of the Iraq War, because we knocked out Saddam's military communications. So if we can do it, I believe other countries can do it as well.
In addition to my novel, A Time for War, which I'll repeat until people finally go out and buy it for Father's Day, where can we read more?
Well, you're kind to ask. Obviously, people should read your book, Time for War. It's got a great red cover. And I have a website if anybody would like to check it out. It's just my name, KarnaBodman.com, KarnaBodman, KarnaBodman.com. Love to have somebody come visit and shoot me an email so they could check it out. And also, anybody who wants to just Google EMP or the EMP threat, there is a lot of information out there on the web, and these are things that I think we should all be very concerned about, talk to our members of Congress about, and, keep our fingers crossed that this administration, or hopefully the next one, will really pay attention.
Karna Bodman, thanks again for being with us on the Savage Nation. I wish you were still in the White House.
Thank you. It's been great fun.
I'll be right back.